Are low interest rates impacting on your investment returns? It's time to rethink. Rethink Investing creates wealth for clients through the strategic purchase of positively geared, high cash flow commercial property. Industrial properties, retail assets, or office spaces can be a smart investment option that produces significant and long-term return on investment. Rethink your investment options and look to commercial property. Learn more at rethinkinvesting.com.au. Rethink Investing, Australia's #1 commercial buyers agency.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show with your host, Phil Tarrant.
Okay, everyone, how you going? Welcome to the podcast and welcome to Commercial Property Week, special edition of the Smart Property Investment Show. We're smack bang in the middle of it this week, today on Wednesday, Commercial Property Week. It's a bit of a special undertaking on smart property investment that we thought we'd look at a number of different reasons why. One is I'm getting a lot more questions coming in around commercial property, a lot of it, I believe, originating from the new commercial property podcast that we created called Inside Commercial Property. And that's really sparked a lot of people's attention. I think looking at the market, being part of the market and navigating the market myself right now, so a lot of people who are highly fatigued about residential property, whether it's mainly the 70 or 80 other people who are turning up for auctions or open for inspections trying to secure property. So people are starting to think a little bit differently about their asset class mix, and commercial property for many residential property investors is a natural next step. Now, we've launched the Commercial Property Week for a number of different reasons. One, really want to demystify commercial lending for a lot of our listeners and readers on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. We wanted to potentially challenge some of your assumptions or perceptions towards commercial property. Number three, just get you thinking a little bit differently about portfolio creation and ongoing growth of your portfolio outside of residential property. There's a number of reasons why you do this. I'm going down that pathway myself right now about adding in some different dynamics into the portfolio to balance out some negative cash flow. That's one strategic way we can go about doing it. But also, there is a bit of a misconception that commercial property is potentially good for yield, but not necessarily good for capital growth. And I think we need to have a really good chat about that today, plus a whole bunch of other issues. So Commercial Property Week, it's going from Monday to Friday of this week, as well as this special edition of the Smart Property Investment Show. There's a whole bunch of content on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. So go and check it out. There's some really, really cool stuff. Our content team, led by Maya, is getting through a whole bunch of different stories on why commercial property is critical for your portfolio in 2021 as one theme, why commercial is the new residential, and how to win in today's commercial property market. So much like residential property, a lot of those dynamics that we're seeing in terms of supply and demand are consistent through commercial. There's not a lot of, inverted commas, really good commercial stock right now. So uncovering it is part of the challenge. So these are some of the things we're going to be talking about today. So hold on, strap in, and you might sort of be sitting there thinking, whoa, I'm finding this a little bit confrontational. I haven't really thought about commercial property that way. That's our objective. Joining me in the studio, Scott O'Neill, Director, Rethink Investing. He's going to help me with these big themes because it's probably outside my pay grade. He's also my co-host on Inside Commercial Property Podcast. Scott, the man of the moment, Mr. Commercial. How's it going?
Very good, mate. It seems like commercial's coming quite mainstream at the moment, which is good, like it should be.
Maybe for you, I reckon, as a challenge, and you do a lot of resi stuff with Rethink, so you're buyer's agent, property strategist, that sort of thing, and you start off and really focus on resi, but you've really morphed your business into specialising in commercial. You're probably going to get sick of every other buyer's agent, property strategist now moving into the commercial market as well and make it even tougher for you. How's that going?
Yeah, look, it is a very specialist field. So, we've changed our business completely where we've got 4 people that literally only do due diligence. We've got another 4 or 5 that are doing property sourcing only. So this is going to make it very hard for your local residential buyer's agent to jump in because it's very boutique, this space. There's not a lot of this stuff around. So our agents will not send properties to other agents. That's kind of our little, I guess, the secret to our business. We've got connections that are valuable. And look, everyone's got their own connections, but we're very widespread. And you have to be because, you've got to cover all of Australia and there's not much out there that has a great tenant in it, which has a great yield and is priced right and is off market. And these are the things we really, home in on. And it's harder than residential as well. So residential, you're protected by bad decisions with time. You could just lets your poor performing property sit there, and over time it'll rise. With commercial, if you buy the wrong commercial, it's going to be, let's say you buy a little shop front that's at the back street that no one walks past. It's forever going to be a dud. So you've got to be a lot more careful with commercial, but when you get it right, it is more lucrative. Hence why we moved our business to this direction, because it does, in general, make better returns for our clients. And that's not just cash flow. We're seeing some 15% on average growth rates at the moment as well per annum. So
yeah, we'll talk about that because people think commercial doesn't grow like residential property. So, and they're very different dynamics. And I've really enjoyed the Inside Commercial Property podcast with you as I've sort of expanded my awareness towards commercial properties and how it can fit within a portfolio. But this is not by any means a new transition for you and your organisation. By memory, back in 2018, you penned a piece for us on smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, which was the difference between a $5 and $10 million portfolio. And you spoke then about, awareness of and connectivity with commercial property as an enabler for portfolio growth and good portfolio growth. A lot of people in residential property, and let's remember, I think 8% of all Australians claim some sort of taxation benefit on their tax return with property investment. Most Australians only own 1 or 2 investment properties, mainly because they buy the wrong property first and they get jammed and stuck. And often time can be a great healer of bad decisions, but sometimes it can take 20 years to fix a bad residential decision. Hence the reason why most Australians only got 1 or 2 investors. I think there is only 20,000 investors in Australia who have more than 6 or more properties. So it's a very small elite club, right? So if you buy the wrong property, it's probably going to put an end to your property journey pretty quickly. That said, commercial, very much consistent with that. So you wrote the difference between a $5 and $10 million portfolio. I think we might even do a bit of an update of that story for 2021, see how consistent these. Go and check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au as part of Commercial Property Week. And thanks, Scott, for partnering us on this initiative. We want to get more information into the hands of our readers and our audience across smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. So your insights is appreciated. And for many property investors, they're just not on the radar with commercial property. So let's get stuck into it. When do you need to, and we're going to go a bit sort of back to basics with this, I think, Scott. When do you need to start considering commercial? And when should you consider commercial property as part of any portfolio mix?
Well, I think you need to start very early these days due to yields in residential. So, you see the Sydney boom at the moment and, even places like Brisbane and Perth and Melbourne, they're all kind of recovering very quickly at the moment. But they're leaving the lowest yields in history for your investors after it. So this is one of the things I look at. I don't look at the next 2 years because, yes, it's going to be looking pretty good, but the residual impact of buying a house with a 3 or 4% gross yield does not get you to retirement. Simple as that. You're not going to retire off 80% lending into a 4% gross yield, and then you've got your maintenance, and then you've got your tenant vacancies and all that. So residential, it gets you equity, but it doesn't solve your retirement problem. So retirement needs to be done via cash flow. So you've got to start thinking very early, how much income do you need for retirement? Is it $100,000? How are you going to get that $100,000? And you can't say, like, I hear a lot of buyers agents go, oh, we've got a 10, 15-year plan to get you $100,000. I laugh at that because they're using $100,000 in today's terms. They haven't accounted for inflation. $100,000 in 15 years is going to be like $30,000 in today's terms. So that won't help, depending on what the inflation level is. So you need $100,000 in today's terms, which is probably double that number, So commercial is a way of getting there a lot quicker. You can buy like net results. So I'll use these numbers just because we did it for a client the other night. They had $600,000 cash. Now, obviously that's a lot. Now we did all the modeling in there for their planning. So that $600,000, if they were going to put that into commercial, they were going to leverage into about a $2.1 million asset. That $2.1 million asset.
He's getting his calculator out right now. You can't help yourself, can you?
No, can't help it. So that 7% return, that's what you're looking with commercial. So 7% on that $2.1 million asset will give you $147,000 net income. Now you got your mortgage on that. So the mortgage on that's going to take roughly, let's just say $30,000 for every $1 million. So, minus $60,000 off that 147 is going to be $87,000 net income. So you've turned $600,000 cash into a very easy $87,000 income today. There's no 15-year wait. Now, look, if you went and put that into residential, you'd probably get 1/3 of that cash flow. You'd be probably looking around 20, 30 if that 35 grand income out of it. Now, that's really not going to get you to retirement. So it's about creating a business. When you want to invest into a property, don't think of it as property. Think of it, I'm building a vehicle which is going to get me into retirement. That vehicle needs to produce equity, needs to produce income. Because remember, the two limiting factors for buying property, do you have a deposit? That's the number one. That's why people can't keep going. Or they don't have the ability to lend more. Or they have, due to poor cash flow. So you got to work out what your weakness is. Is it the ability to get the next deposit? If that's the case, you might need to look for value add type properties. Residential can be good for that, but alternatively, commercial can be just as good because you can make quick equity gains for the right property there. There are probably more angles to make quick equity gains out of commercial because of all the different accountancy tricks you can do with leases and extending leases and improving the strength of that asset. You can do that without picking up a shovel. Same deal with residential. You might get into the strata titling and all that kind of stuff. But if you can create a deposit and then use that deposit to then produce more income, it's that kind of, balance you need to get going.
So that all makes sense, and you've banged out some numbers there. I'd like to see that sort of documented in some sort of article, mate. So that probably just flew over a lot of people's head. They just went, what just happened, right? So we'll make sure we do that. We'll get some details into some of these articles as part of our Commercial Property Week. Now, this all sounds good, right? This commercial property stuff. And there's a lot of people now playing in this space than what there were some time ago. Is the window of opportunity to get involved in commercial, has it now passed? Because everyone now is considering a commercial proposition for portfolio creation purely because the residential market is so challenging right now and you're not getting the yields that you used to get.
Look, it is harder, and this is where you have to buy well. So like you mentioned, there's lots of buyers agents having their crack at this, and I see them because a lot of the our clients will share these details and they're just showing stuff off the internet, where I saw one that was trying to sell them an office space in the Melbourne CBD, and you think they obviously have no idea about commercial. So again, if you're running at that kind of into those sort of risky markets, you can lose money. But there's opportunities out there where there's a long run way to go. So Sydney and Melbourne, where the yields are very low, I don't think there's a lot of gas left in the tank for potential growth because the yields are getting so sharp. Where's the value for a future investor to pay more? It's really just rental growth. There are other markets around the country which are just starting on this growth market. And then look, there are capital cities, it's pretty easy to guess which ones. But yeah, look, it's about picking the right market and the right asset. Regional Australia in large regional centres are looking very strong as well. But there's not much supply of stuff coming up as well. So COVID's delayed construction and all that kind of stuff a lot in areas. But if you're buying a good built out area where they're not building more and the area's improving economically, you're going to get good growth on top. So it's about doing the numbers. You've got to buy with a good yield day one. Like you can get an interest rate of 2% for commercial, believe it or not. And if you go buy a 6% net yielding asset, you're making 4% on the loan alone. That's a good set of numbers. So there is definitely still opportunities. It is not the start of the cycle, so you're not day one of this growth phase. You might be a third of the way through it, but there's still 2/3 left to go.
And how does it work with commercial, if you want to put it in relevance to residential markets? Does commercial property in areas operate in isolation to resi? So if the western suburbs of Sydney, for example, are booming in terms of property, which it's doing right now, does commercial follow suit or operates at sort of disparate levels?
A bit of both. Okay. So there is a genuine, like you mentioned at the start of this podcast, people are getting frustrated with residential. If you go to a home and there's 70 people in front of you and you don't want to go buy, that property at a 2% yield, and even if you're an owner-occupier, you might go, well, I might as well just rent. It's a bargain to rent here compared to buying it. Instead of doing nothing with my money, I will create an income. And this is what my wife and I did. We were rent investors 10 years before buying a house to live in. That rent vesting allowed us to invest all our surplus funds into all sorts of different high cash flow properties around the country. And it now pays our entire current owner-occupier house off. So we set up a portfolio.
So the free pass you get on positive cash flow on your investment properties pays your mortgage on your principal place of residence.
Yeah, about 3.5 times over. So
it's all right. You need to get a bigger house, mate, with a bigger loan.
Yeah, but look, a lot of my clients do the same thing. It's not about just getting also romantic about the house to live in. Like you can always get it. Just don't buy it in the peak of the market and pay 20% overs for it. That's the boring mathematical side of me. I don't see logic in getting into the hype of the market because, there is just so much ridiculous buying happening at the moment. And like, we've had these same conversations back in 2016, 17, and, back in the, 2012. And like, we've seen all this before and it'll come again, but don't go above your means to buy a house that's going to lock you into a mortgage for the rest of your life, and then you can't set yourself up for a future. So you've got to have a balanced view, and I'm a big believer of creating a passive income through property that will support buying your dream house later on.
Yeah, and I subscribe to the same strategy. So it's not too late to get involved in commercial. Is commercial right for everyone?
No, it's not. So commercial, you need larger deposits. Like, this is not a space for someone who's got 50 grand in the bank, first time investor. You need at least 100 grand just to even get a look in on an entry level property, because you'll lend that up to like a maybe 350, 400 type K property with stamp duty and all that in there. So 100 grand is the minimum, but generally there's not many properties in that space worth buying at about 400 grand. So we see most good quality deals start showing their face around 800K, with exceptions, of course. Our average price for a client is about 1.5 million for our purchases. So we do operate in a higher budget because that's where the best deals are. And most people are refinancing a house and got a lot of equity, or they haven't bought for a few years, saved up money like that. There's a lot of money in the economy, hence why we're seeing this growth, and it's happening in the housing market as well. Like, people are fairly cashed up from what I can see at least. And, commercial is not a space for those who are really risk averse and never invested before. Like, if you've got a couple of properties and you're looking to improve your cash flow, great, it's for you. If you've got a really steady job, like I've got a lot of doctor clients who've got, or lawyers that get paid very well, and they've got a house to live in, but they want to retire in 10 years. Like, that could be a perfect entry for them to get into commercial, because you can replace your income quite quick if you do this right. So, business owners, people in secure jobs, people that already own a portfolio that they need to reverse their cash flow situation. It's more for those types.
Yeah, it sounds a bit familiar because, as you know, we share the warts and all of the smart property investment portfolio on this particular podcast. And one of the things I want to do is improve the cash flow position. And that's the reason why we're looking at commercial right now. So you're saying that a bit of scar tissue investing in property can help make you a better commercial property investor. So start off in resi as a bit of a playbook, get some runs on the board, and then leverage up into commercial.
Yeah, so it's like residential, but there's just lots of other factors. Like, you've got to understand the businesses and why they need the space and why would they not move somewhere else, what the vacancy rates in the area. That's relatable to residential. But you got to understand, like, when we talk to tenants, if you haven't been around business and been able to pick up little things, you might not pick up the fact they could be moving in 2 years because they've got 2 extra staff and, they've just launched a big marketing campaign. You can tell there's going to be more, bums on the ground in that business, which will outgrow that space. Or you might see the access on a property's poor and they can't get trucks in, and that one of the operators in the business keeps whinging about it. And, you've got to realize that could mean that this is not a good property because access is poor, and that's going to lead to longer vacancies down the track. And there's just a lot more angles that you have to sort of be around it for a while. And like, I'm blessed with my job because we've been able to help, literally thousands of clients buy it. So we're up to about 1.1 billion in commercial property, and I'm still learning. There's just different properties with different problems and different lending rules and different valuation methods. And it's pretty hard. Like, I know when I first bought my first property, it was probably the most daunting purchase of my life because you don't have a reference. I'm going off my residential and it's just not relatable. I bought a convenience centre and a fish and chip shop. I've mentioned that before. And I didn't know a thing about these businesses.
Do you like fish and chips?
I do. Yeah. And that's why, honestly, I thought I'm a tragic for once a week get a grilled or battered fish and chips. It's, something.
Where'd you buy this?
This was in Perth back. Okay. It was about 2014.
Yeah.
And it was a good experience, but it had a short lease on it. So there were the fish and chips had like 5 years left on it. So that was a set and forget. There's only 9 months left on the other one. So I took the risk because I called them up and, verbally it was all going to get agreed on. And they did agree to taking on the lease, but then there was a divorce with the lady and basically it went vacant for 9 months. She stopped paying rent. But this is where I fell in love with commercial property because What I realised is that lease that she signed was a legal obligation to pay that rent. No questions asked. It was a lawyer letter. It was a simple, you can put caveats on their house and all sorts of horrible things, but it's not about being horrible. It's about just collecting the rent that you have to collect to pay your mortgage. And we replaced that tenant in 5 months, and the previous tenant had to pay all the differences in costs. So the 5 months vacancy plus legals plus reletting, it was all covered. And I just thought, this is after I was dealing with a whole bunch of war stories with residential, like from drug addicts to, there was syringes left in toilets deliberately to piss plumbers off and stuff like that. I was dealing with all that and thinking, and then when they don't pay their rent, you don't have a leg to stand on as a landlord in residential. But commercial, it was fair. I was like, this is like business. This is what I like. This is normal stuff. And it was a whole lot more calming, I thought.
Yeah, and this is the point where I think every property investor needs to act like they're a business owner, and the creation of their portfolio is a business. There's a key outcome you want at the end of it. But commercial just requires another layer of sophistication and skills. But that shouldn't turn you off from investing in property. You've got good professionals operating in the space like Scott, for example, who support you through all these things that you don't know. But, I'm trying to understand, if you're not in business and you don't do it every single day, it's hard to actually, if you just get your PAYG check every single month and you've never had to run a business, it's hard to actually drill down into a business and understand the basic building blocks of what makes successful in commercial property investment. Is it a bridge too far, or it can be learned?
Look, I remember I researched about 18 months before I bought my first one, and I was so green. So look, it can 100% be learnt. This is not rocket science, let's be honest. It's about understanding the property, the relatability, what's its previous history with the rentals side of things. Is there an arm's length transaction? Like if the owner's the tenant, have they inflated the rent? Check the square metre rates, make sure there's no issues with the building. Make sure the area is on the way up as well. If you're buying a growth corridor and the rent's at a fair market rate and you bought well and the building's solid, it's probably a recipe for a good result. The real trick with commercial is just finding the asset. And that's why we're so openly sharing everything we know about commercial property, because I know at the end of the day, it won't really hurt a business like myself, because there is that's the hardest bit, to find the properties, and that's what we specialise in. We find more of these off-market properties than I think anyone else does, and that's, I guess, our secret. And it's, I guess, if you're going to do it yourself, pick an area that you're really into, it might be local, hit up all the agents, become very close with them, and just seek the off-markets through there. So that's the trick. It's the asset at the end of the day. You can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you can't find the right property for sale, it won't be a good purchase. Very similar to, say, buying in the eastern suburbs of Sydney. If you want a house at the moment freestanding under a certain price point, good luck. There's 100 others that want the same thing. So it's the same with commercial.
And you talk about real estate agents. Do residential agents also do commercials, and normally a specialised part of a local office that does this bit, or is there specific commercial letting agents?
Oh, it's specialised. So it's always a worry when a residential guy is selling a commercial property, because the due diligence is 10 times harder for us, because they've missed numbers or the...
Do you see that as an opportunity though, because they probably don't know what's going on?
Oh,
or
no.
Is it just more of a headache?
It's a headache, to be honest, because we're going to pay the correct amount for what that asset's worth, and an agent won't really influence that. We just want the agent to be a really good conduit of information. So they've got all the rates notices, they've got all the tenant history, the tenant ledgers. We want it nice and clear up front, because then we can do our homework. If we've got someone who's never understood what the cap rate of an area is, and they're selling it 100 grand more or 100 grand less, look, there could be an opportunity, but normally it's priced too high.
Yeah, okay. It sounds like an absolute minefield. So let's go to 101 stuff. And for Commercial Property Week, for a lot of people, this is an introduction into or expansion of your attitude or mindset towards commercial property. Much like residential property, there is different types of commercial assets. In residential, you might house, unit, detached. It might be strata titled. It might be Torrens titled. You can invest in different locations in different ways. Commercial property, largely 4 different types of assets. And Scott, hopefully I get this right. You got sort of office, retail, industrial, and specialty type. If we're going to be simplified, is that a pretty good split of it all?
Yeah. Some people might class medical as a fifth.
Fifth.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, look, that's exactly right. The specialties are generally like service stations, childcare, single-use products.
Okay. Now, let's just quickly go through those 4. I'm going to count medical as one of the specialties. Can you give me a quick sentence on each of them? What office? Tell us about office and what do you reckon about it right now? A little bit more than a sentence. Give me a paragraph.
So office, CBD office is generally like your A class stuff where you'll have your big corporates there. Generally, you've got to have, there's pretty big incentives in there to sign up. So that's a negative with it. Vacancy rates are across the country probably about 10% at the moment. So 1 in 10 buildings, if you pack up every other building at full capacity, 1 in 10 would be totally empty right now. So that is one of the reasons we're not too bullish on the office space for now. It will make a comeback. It will, especially when the borders open. A lot of internationals dying to get into Australia. That market is not permanently dead, but a lot of people think it is. So that'll come back.
So like resi, matter of timing. Tell me about industrial, which is, from what I understand, getting a real kick in the pants at the moment.
Yeah, industrial is manufacturing, storage, logistics, all that type of stuff. So that's obviously doing very well with COVID. A lot of businesses like Big W have done record online trades. That all means posting more, storing more, also manufacturing more potentially. So manufacturing is doing well in Australia too, since the supply chains to overseas have got slower and weaker. So industrial floor space is more valuable than it ever has been. So that's why you're seeing growth in rents, and investors have a more appetite for it as well, which is meaning people will pay more for the exact same product. So cap rates are shrinking because people are paying more for the same rent. Industrial is, you've got the same sort of A class, B class, C class, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, concrete tilt-up slab is generally what it is, where you've just got concrete walls and a tin roof or iron roof, Colorbond roof, whatever you want to call it, and a big high, ceiling, and you just store a heap of stuff in it.
It's pretty cheap to make commercial property.
Generally about 1,000 to 1,200 a square metre. So
Okay.
and it's quick to build because there's not much to it,
Do you do much, like a lot of people invest in residential so they can secure a spot and either get it rezoned and do a townhouse development or a flat development or whatever. Do you sort of go down the same pathway with commercial? Like, do you buy a block to add value to it and or knock it down or do something else?
Yeah, look, I'm very big on freehold land. Like, obviously that comes at a price. So if an investor comes to me with a higher budget, we always go for freehold.
What's freehold?
Basically, you've got full control of the property. It's not part of a strata.
Okay.
It means you have the ability to knock the building down, go for a DA, give a higher use to the land potentially.
So same as residential, either in a strata or not a strata environment. You own all of it or you own a bit of it.
Exactly. It's the exact same. So you'd rather a house over a unit any day if you can afford it in the equivalent suburb.
Yeah. And let's just park that. I'll come back to it. But retail, everyone buys their stuff online now. Hence the reason why industrial is doing well.
Yeah, so retail it's very mixed. So I actually love retail in the right, like neighborhood shopping center type retail. So that's got a real kick since COVID because people don't want to go into big air conditioned malls. They rather drive and park in front of the chemist and go in and come out, get their food, go to the supermarket. So neighborhood
Get
shopping.
some fish and chips.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, that stuff's doing well. And stuff that isn't is high-end retail is struggling. We mentioned it many times on this podcast, things like your highway style retail where you're walking, like there's no solution for a customer. There's no car spots there. You've got to park on a clearway and quickly run into a shop like that. That's a dying model. And we're seeing that because rents are too high for the businesses. So yeah, retail needs to have a lot of car spots, needs to be in a very good, convenient location. It's got to have a good mix of retail so you don't get drawn into that location just for one shop. There's got to be like your anchor tenant, like a supermarket, and that'll bring people in and then they get their haircut next door and then they get their noodle box, 2 doors down. It's basically a convenience centre, like it said.
So commodity-based stuff that everyone needs in order to live their lives, not high-spec retail to go and buy a handbag or some earrings or a new frock or something. I don't know if people buy frocks anymore. So is there much of that stuff around though? Like the suburban shopping centres, I guess shopping centres and shopping malls, two things. So you got the one where you can park outside, go to the bottle shop, or the one where you got to go inside in a conditioned area. Is there much of that around?
No, look, we look hard for it. So we bought 2 last month for clients, off-market transactions. They're high value. So one was 6.6 million and one was 9.9 million.
Outside or in like a mall type thing?
No, they're outside supermarkets. So they had like, your Bottle-O. There was a gym in the big one, a 9.1. It had a gym in it, which was a bit of an anchor tenant as well, bringing people in. And then you had every type of shop you could imagine after. There's 14 tenants. So
whereabouts? It's sort of
Sunshine
region?
Coast.
Sunshine Coast?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And then the other one was in Brisbane. So yeah, look, they're out there. Yields 7% still,
Okay.
which was the surprising part. But yeah, we like retail.
So not to go into too many details, but what sort of investor secured that 14 tenant sort of 9-ish million type of thing? Where are they in their investing journey?
So they've high net worth client. They've bought 2 industrials through me previously, and they had a couple of boarding houses in Sydney and stuff like
Sounds
that.
like a headache.
Yeah, look, I'm not a big boarding house person. Like it's boarding houses are sort of there for people who want cash flow, but they don't feel comfortable enough to go into commercial. So for me, it's a bit of it's a half measure. You know, like you can get better cash flow, but let's be honest, do you really want to deal with the full management of a boarding house? And they're not cheap as well. Like this is not $1 million purchase. A boarding house could be $5 million. Yeah. And then by the time you really skin off all your outgoings, you're back down to a smallish deal.
A lot of hard work, management issues in boarding houses with the personalities of tenants. Anyway, not for today. And sort of specialty, like let's talk medical for specialty. How's that going?
So medical obviously is very popular right now. So pandemic, medical, people still need to go to the doctor, still need to get their checks done. It's literally a recession-proof type business. And that could include dentists, physiotherapists, GPs, psychologists. All these guys are doing pretty well. Obviously, lockdowns are still going to affect all of those people. But look, with the vaccine coming out and the likelihood of those, flash lockdowns are going to get less likely over time. So, yeah, medical comes at a price as well, but it is worth it at the right price because they're very sticky tenants. They don't leave quickly. They're not P&L driven. They're not going to go, oh, look, the neighbour's renting for 10% cheaper. I'm going to move my $400,000 fit out to move next door to pay a little bit less rent. That doesn't happen. So you generally get them for the long term. Like I know my childhood GP, 30 years ago, he's still there in the same spot. They just do a little revamp of the place every decade and if that.
Every 30 years, I reckon some of those are. Well, what is it with the medical profession and really crap offices? Like you go to these places, you just think, come on. They're always so run down. Some of them are really smick, but most of them aren't.
Probably because they're flat out and they don't need to. And they've just got their little office and they can do everything they do. I don't know. It's just they're not a private enterprise business mindset type. They make their money nice and leanly.
Yeah, well, there you go. Fair enough. Now, I just want to pick up, we touched on it quickly, development and it's Commercial Property Week, so I just really want to do a bit of a catch-all. So a lot of people like the idea of residential, so they'll build a portfolio and then as they get a little bit more sophisticated, they'll start identifying assets that they can do value adds to, sort of rezoning or townhouse development or flat development. We touched on it quickly with commercial. How hard is it? And imagine, much like residential, if you get it wrong, you can get it really wrong. Developing is where a lot of residential investors, they get a bit too big for their boots and they blow all their dough on the mistiming or mismanagement of a development. Same can happen in commercial. How specialised is it?
Yeah, exactly the same, except it's probably a little bit more heightened because obviously you've got to sell with tenants in place to get your best dollar. So if you're building like 20 warehouses, you need to tenant them really to get the best price. And yes, you will get them sold to owner-occupiers. And the owner-occupier market now is really strong. But vacant land, you're going to pay a premium for it as well in this market. Like nothing's cheap. So then you've got to factor in the fact you've got to build it. That costs time and money. Then you've got to go find tenants quick. That's more time. Then you've got to, funding it is more difficult. But I don't know. For me, commercial, you're there for the good cash flow and growth. Sometimes you don't need to get too cute and try, set the world on fire and try add extra risk to it because the original product, when you buy it at the right price, does the job anyway. Yeah. That's me being a non-developer talking. And, we've seen many projects over the years where we're buying off a developer at a price that they're making a loss as well, So I think it's better to buy well. It's quicker as well and easier if you've got a real good tenant and you're getting it at the right price. But, there are going to be opportunities for developers in the next couple of years as prices rise. If you've got the land already and you've, especially if you're an owner builder, you're going to make very good money.
Are they doing much rezoning from resi to commercial anywhere? And let's talk about Sydney as where we are. Is that pretty much done? Like they're pretty tight catchments. And I'm thinking sort of more industrial because office and retail sort of intermixed with just your sort of suburban growth, but you normally have specific industrial areas.
Yeah, look, the classic example is Alexandria. So they've obviously gone through rezoning there because, you can build high-rise units there, and that is very close to the CBD. And its higher use is residential because you can go 20 floors up and that's going to be worth more than a
factory
10 meter high warehouse, so there's a lot of case by cases around that. You can apply for the rezoning if you're in that kind of local vicinity of where the boundaries are. And yeah, there's definitely opportunities, but we're talking big ticket stuff there, like 10,000 square meters of property. Like that's out of the realm for most mums and dads.
Yeah. You think about the rezonings, Alexandra, you had a whole bunch of sort of family-owned businesses out there who had good producing businesses, but they also owned the land and they did very, very well out of that stuff. Now, let's quickly talk locations. So we're talking about sort of the assets, commercial or industrial and retail and also specialty type stuff. Everyone's talking about the residential market, saying pretty much every single investor will fluke capital growth in this market because every market is moving, right? So you don't have these two-speed markets where it might be booming in Sydney and it's going backwards in Melbourne like everywhere seems to be, and this is the data we're getting on smart property investment. You're seeing growth Australia-wide, right? So just getting and being in the game means you'll probably do quite well. That said, you could probably do a lot better in some areas than others, and that's your skill set as a property investor to work out where to invest. With commercial right now, where should you be spending your money if you give me some locations without giving too much away? Sunshine Coast, no doubt, but you've got that sewed up.
Yeah, so look, it's very yield driven. So for me, like yield's an indication of future value. So if you're starting to buy in Sydney at a 4% net yield, where's it going to go from there? It can't get much sharper because interest rates are quite low already. And, I don't think there's much opportunity for above normal growth there. But your usual Brisbanes will pop up, surrounding areas of that as well. Perth is showing as an opportunity, but vacancy rates are still high for many. Like you won't touch office anywhere at the moment. I don't think. This is not advice. This is literally just my
your view,
humble opinion on a subsector. But having said that, office space in more of your external locations, like your suburbs, are very popular at the moment. Like moving out of the city to the suburbs is something that's happened in many cases. So not all office space is bad, but it's very tenant specific. That's probably the big thing I've got to stress. It's not me saying, industrial in Perth is great. It's more about, is the tenant in place great? Because if they've got a 5-year lease and they've got a huge fit out and they're paying a very high rent for the next 5 years, you've already locked in your money straight up with the lease and the tenant. So that's the beautiful thing with commercial. It's case by case. You can't standardize it like residential because you're just going to, with residential, you're going to ride the tide in. Everyone's going to do well. And this is the thing I want to challenge the residential investors who are running to buy anything at the moment. What are they going to be left with after it grows 10, 15, 20%? They're left with a residual income that's quite low, that gross yield of 3% or 4%. That doesn't solve you many problems after retirement. How can you get access to your growth? You've got to refinance it. That means more debt, lower cash flow, or you sell, pay capital gains tax. So it's a thing that these investors who have kind of got into that fear of missing out mentality have to concentrate on. Don't just chase the next 10% growth because that does not solve any problems for you. Having a good income long-term, a self-sustaining portfolio is where it's at if you want to get into that sort of larger portfolio status. And all professional investors think like that. Remember, it's like a business. It's not, let's quickly get that 10% growth because the market's running hot. Hotspot seeking is a waste of time.
Absolute folly. And that's what most people like to read, though. So it's quite funny watching on Smart Property Investment. You do anything about hotspots, everyone's right onto it. But, that's sage counsel from you in terms of if you're chasing 10% in this market, you're probably thinking things the wrong way. Now, where can commercial all go wrong?
So if you buy the wrong type of asset which can't be relet, so this is the thing. Whenever we look for a property for a client, no matter what's in there at the moment, like you could have Coles in there or, the best tenant you've ever seen. But imagine if they weren't there right now, and then you've got to actually be happy with that situation. So if you have let's say you had your Coles tenant and they left, you'd probably go, well, who would move in there? Or can I split it up into smaller spots? Like that's your plan B. If you can get that plan B sorted, that worst case scenario, you can be happier. And that's why we do a lot of multi-tenant stuff. And I know, that resonates with yourself. It's about having, other tenants pay the mortgage while your other one's vacant. You've still got, covers there. But if you buy the wrong asset, I think there's going to be a lot of people get burnt in the fuel station space and also the childcare space in the next decade. You simply won't need as many as they're building at the moment, especially like the childcare sector. It's propped up. It's got low vacancy rates, and they're building a lot more at the moment because every residential developer's cottoned on that you can quickly build a house, put a playground equipment in it, whack a 15-year lease on it and sell it for double the price.
Yeah.
So, that'll all catch up at some point, I think. Again, just my opinion, seeing a lot of them for sale at the moment. But yields are getting too low in that space because people value the long lease, but they don't look at it as the business can't fail either, because they can. And then how would you relet that? So that's the worst case scenario that I wouldn't be happy with, because I wouldn't want to relet a childcare if the first one failed.
Yeah, so it's very much around de-risking and looking at all those what-if scenarios, and I guess planning for the worst, hoping for the best, which is what the best investors do. It was good, Scott. I think we've covered a fair bit of ground. What's been the best property you've ever bought? Can you give me something where you've just gone, this is a great case study? I'm going to also ask you about the worst.
Yeah, the best one. Put me on the spot.
Yeah, just give me something which is maybe not the absolute best, but something which is just real good bread and butter commercial property where you're securing or what you're securing for your clients.
So one I really liked was about 2 years ago, we bought a property it was about 10Ks out, 15Ks out from Brisbane CBD. It was 6-tenant industrial complex on one title. We bought it at about a 7.8% net yield. So during the DD.
So 7.8% net yield. So after all costs.
7.8.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right now that you could sell that at a 6% yield. So, if you do, I'll get the calculator out. If you do 7.8 divided by 6, it's a 1.3. So 30% difference in value. So that was around 1.7 mil. So you could sell that with your eyes closed for 30% more now. So pretty good little return. But we're able to renegotiate leases during a 28-day due diligence clause on it. So that improved value as well. There's also strata title opportunity for it. 1.7 mil, it had 3,500 square metres of land close to the city as well. So there is all sorts of potentials with that long term. Whether you put a storage facility on it or put more warehouses or sell them off in smaller pieces. It's not the highest value deal. It's definitely not the cheapest. But, if you're in the market and you're going to buy a 3-bedroom townhouse in Sydney, compare that to what that massive yielding property would do for you equity and cash flow wise. That's the type of stuff we love to find. And it can happen on larger scales and smaller scales. It's just. So
the basic building blocks are reasonably consistent irrespective of the price point.
Yeah, exactly. And look, there's nothing really that could go wrong with it. Like, you lose a tenant, you've got 5 others paying. If you lose 2, you've got the other 4 still paying. We worked out only 2 of those tenants needed to be paying rent to cover the mortgage. Okay. So it's all
it's a good
profit.
De-risk. And the purchaser still owns that asset?
Yep.
They're happy, no doubt?
Yeah, happy. They're going to redraw on it and go again, basically.
Okay. Nice. And give me one of the less performing assets that you've bought where you've gone, wish we did that a bit better.
So probably the one that most disappointed in was it was a very entry level, like 200 grand one. So it was in an industrial suburb and it was just an office space. Had a good tenant in place at the time of purchase, went vacant just before COVID, and it's just been hard to refill that one. So it's been vacant for about 6-7 months, which is, luckily it's a small purchase and that client owns, a dozen properties as well. So it's not the end of the world, but, imagine if that was your first property, and that's the worst case scenario, long vacancy. And the reason that one is not filling is because the office market is in general a little bit weaker right now. And we've come off, lockdowns and COVID, and there's inquiries starting on that all the time now. So that'll get filled. It's not, but the good thing is even that worst case scenario, the asset value has gone up. You could sell that for more than they paid. And it's just, the vacancy that's just something we don't like dealing with.
Yeah, nice one. Well, thanks, Scott. That's really good. A lot of really good insights there. We've covered a lot of ground, so go and check out smartpropertyinvestment.com.au for Commercial Property Week. We're big, deep dive into this. I hope you're enjoying the coverage around it. And again, the objective is to expand your awareness towards and insights of investing in commercial property as part of portfolio creation. And why do you create a property portfolio? Well, I know most people I know do it to try and plan for some sort of optional choice when it comes towards retirement. So taking control of your financial future, maybe commercial property is part of that equation. Thanks again. How do people find out more about you?
Just Google Rethink Investing.
Yep.
And we're all over the internet and Happy to chat.
Have a chat. Nice one. And thanks for joining us today. Any questions at all around commercial property, send them in as part of Commercial Property Week. We'll get them answered. If it's not on the Smart Property Investment Show, myself and Scott will do it on our specific commercial podcast, Inside Commercial Property. You can email the team here, editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. That's how you can connect in with us. Remember, keep checking out social media if that's how you like to get your info. Smart Property HQ is where you can track us down, like us, share us. You can direct message us as well if that's how you want to go about doing stuff. Thanks for joining us today. I do appreciate you connecting in, and hopefully we're helping you out on this journey through wealth creation in property. We'll be back again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.